The slap rang sharply through the glass lobby of Kingsley Holdings, cutting through the morning silence. Lorraine Kingsley's hand dropped back to her side as the young maid staggered, barely keeping her balance against the marble wall. A fragile gasp escaped the girl's lips. No one stepped forward. Security guards fixed their eyes ahead. Executives suddenly found the floor fascinating. At the center of the lobby stood Billionaire CEO Sebastian Adewale Kingsley, close enough to stop it, powerful enough to end it, yet saying nothing. Then a quiet voice rose. "Madam, please." People turned in shock. A poor maid had stepped out of line, her uniform worn, her posture humble, but her gaze unflinching. Her name was Nokuthula Mbatha. Lorraine's smile tightened disbelief, hardening into anger. No one had ever spoken to her like that. The air grew heavy because everyone felt it. This was the moment silence finally broke.
Before we continue, tell us, what country are you watching from, and what time is it there? If stories about courage and justice speak to you, please subscribe and stay with us.
Nokuthula Mbatha had learned long ago how to walk quietly through other people's worlds. The morning she arrived at Kingsley Holdings, Johannesburg was already awake. Taxis, honking vendors, shouting glass towers reflecting a sky that promised nothing. Nokuthula stood outside the service entrance with her small canvas bag pressed to her chest, breathing slowly, counting her steps the way she did when fear threatened to overwhelm her. Inside that bag were two things that mattered: her identification papers and a folded hospital invoice with her brother's name on it. Sifo Mbatha was 17 and fighting a sickness that had drained the color from his face and the strength from his bones. Every day, he needed medicine Nokuthula could barely afford. Every missed payment came with a warning, and every warning reminded her that kindness alone did not keep people alive. That was why she was here. Kingsley Holdings rose above the street, like a fortress of wealth-polished stone-tinted glass, silent authority. Nokuthula had cleaned offices, before worked in private homes, scrubbed floors in hospitals. But this place felt different. Here, power was not loud. It didn't need to be. A supervisor named Mrs. Pauline Dlamini led her through back corridors that smelled of disinfectant and money. She spoke quickly, as if kindness was a luxury she couldn't afford to waste. "You'll work primarily in the private residence upstairs," Mrs. Dlamini said. "Eyes down, ears closed. Do what you're told and you'll last." Nokuthula nodded. She didn't ask questions. She never did. The private residence was nothing like the cramped room she shared with Sifo in Soweto. The floors shone without effort. The walls carried art Nokuthula didn't recognize but instinctively knew was expensive. Everything felt untouchable, including the people. That was when Lorraine Kingsley appeared. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't need to. Her presence alone rearranged the air. Tall, perfectly dressed, her posture sharp as glass. Lorraine moved through the room like someone accustomed to obedience. Her eyes landed on Nokuthula for a brief second, measuring dismissive. New Lorraine said flatly. "Yes, Madam," Nokuthula replied, lowering her gaze. Lorraine turned away without another word. That single moment told Nokuthula everything she needed to know. Later that day, Nokuthula met Mama Eunice Okafor, the oldest cleaner in the residence. Mama Eunice's back was bent from years of work, but her eyes were alert, carrying stories no one had asked to hear. "Do not draw attention," Mama Eunice whispered as they polished a long dining table together. "Here silence keeps you alive." Nokuthula nodded, but something inside her tightened. She had been silent all her life. Silence had not saved her parents. Silence had not healed Sifo. Silence had not paid hospital bills. But she understood fear, and she respected it. The man of the house, Sebastian Adewale Kingsley, was harder to read. Nokuthula saw him only in fragments, passing through corridors, speaking quietly into his phone, standing near windows with the posture of someone always thinking 5 steps ahead. He was younger than she had imagined his face. Controlled his presence, heavy without effort. When staff greeted him, he responded with polite distance. Not cruel, not kind, just absent. To Sebastian, the house ran smoothly. That was enough. Over the next days, Nokuthula learned the rhythm of the residence. She cleaned, served, listened without appearing to listen. She noticed the way other maids flinched when Lorraine entered a room. She noticed how wages were delayed without explanation, how one girl disappeared after talking back and no one dared ask where she went. She also noticed something else. Lorraine enjoyed control, small humiliations, silent commands, watching people shrink. One afternoon, Nokuthula saw Lorraine knock a tray from a maid's hands, not in anger but boredom. The girl dropped to her knees to clean it, apologizing again and again. Sebastian walked past. He paused. His eyes flicked briefly toward the scene. Then he kept walking. That night, Nokuthula sat beside Sifo's hospital bed, holding his thin hand. The machines hummed softly, indifferent to human fear. "How was work?" Sifo asked, forcing a smile. "It's fine," Nokuthula lied. Sifo studied her face. "You don't sound fine." Nokuthula swallowed. "I just need to last," she said quietly. "Just long enough." Sifo squeezed her fingers. "You always last." She smiled, but inside something ached. Back at Kingsley Holdings, Nokuthula kept her head down until the morning Lorraine humiliated another maid in the lobby. The memory replayed in Nokuthula's mind like a wound that wouldn't close, the sound of the slap, the way everyone froze, the way power filled the silence. Nokuthula hadn't planned to speak. She had felt it rise in her chest, an old stubborn thing she had inherited from her mother, who once told her, "Dignity is the only thing no one can take unless you hand it over." Lorraine's eyes had burned into hers. Sebastian's silence had cut deeper than words. Now whispers followed Nokuthula through the corridors. "That's the one," someone murmured. The new girl said another. Mama Eunice pulled Nokuthula aside. "You must be careful," she warned. "Madame Lorraine does not forget." "I didn't mean to cause trouble," Nokuthula said softly. Mama Eunice sighed. "Trouble already existed. You just made it visible." From his office above the city, Sebastian looked down at Johannesburg and tried to shake the image of the maid who had spoken. He told himself it was nothing. People came and went every day. Staff emotions were not his responsibility. Lorraine managed the household. He managed the empire. That was the agreement. That was how order was maintained. Yet later, as he reviewed contracts he could recite by memory, Nokuthula's steady gaze returned uninvited. Not defiant, not pleading, just present. For the first time in years, Sebastian felt the discomfort of a question he had avoided too long. And, far below in the service corridors where power rarely looked, Nokuthula Mbatha picked up her mop, squared her shoulders, and kept working, unaware that her quiet courage had already begun to shift something dangerous. Something that would not remain silent for long. If Kingsley Holdings had a language, fear was its most fluent speaker. Nokuthula Mbatha began to understand this within her first full week inside the residence. It wasn't written anywhere, yet everyone knew it. Fear decided who spoke, who stayed, who vanished. It shaped footsteps in corridors and taught eyes where not to linger. The rules were simple. Mama Eunice explained one morning while they scrubbed the edges of a marble staircase. "Do not answer questions you are not asked," Mama Eunice murmured, her voice barely louder than the cloth against stone. "Do not explain yourself. Do not defend yourself. And never, never look Madame Lorraine in the eyes unless she demands it." Nokuthula nodded, committing every word to memory. Still, the rules felt heavier than silence. They pressed against her chest each time she saw another maid flinch at the sound of heels. Each time a whisper ended abruptly when a shadow crossed the doorway. Lorraine Kingsley ruled without shouting. Her cruelty was precise. One afternoon, Nokuthula watched as a young cleaner named Zanele was summoned to the sitting room. Zanele's hands shook as she stood before Lorraine, who examined her nails with disinterest. "You were late this morning," Lorraine said calmly. "There was a delay with the taxis." Madame Zanele replied, her voice breaking. Lorraine tilted her head. "Excuses suggest incompetence." By evening, Zanele's name had been removed from the duty roster. No explanation. No farewell. "Where did she go?" Nokuthula asked quietly. Mama Eunice didn't answer right away. When she finally spoke, her voice was flat. "Wherever fear sends her." The message was clear. Nokuthula worked harder than anyone. She arrived early, left late, kept her movements smooth and her voice soft. Yet something about her unsettled Lorraine. Perhaps it was the way Nokuthula listened, or the way she helped others without being asked. Once Nokuthula noticed an older maid struggling to lift a heavy box. Without thinking, she stepped forward to help. Lorraine saw it. "Did I instruct you to assist?" Lorraine asked sharply. "No," Madame Nokuthula replied, lowering her head. "Then do not take liberties," Lorraine said. "Kindness creates weakness." The words landed hard. Sebastian Adewale Kingsley witnessed moments like these from a distance. He was not blind, he simply chose not to see too closely. He told himself that domestic matters were Lorraine's domain, that interfering would undermine their carefully constructed balance, that the staff were paid to endure. Still, he began noticing patterns: delayed wages, increased turnover, a tension that seemed to thicken whenever Lorraine entered a room. During a late evening meeting, Sebastian overheard two assistants whispering about unpaid overtime. "Lorraine handles the household accounts," one said nervously. "Yes, but the numbers don't," the other began before stopping abruptly as Sebastian walked past. He said nothing. Meanwhile, Nokuthula discovered the unspoken hierarchy among the staff. Those who complied without question survived. Those who protested disappeared. And those who endured quietly were allowed to exist, barely. One night after finishing her shift, Nokuthula followed Mama Eunice into a narrow storeroom where the older woman kept her cleaning supplies. The door closed behind them, sealing out the house. Mama Eunice leaned against a shelf, her shoulders sagging. "You spoke up in the lobby," she said softly. Nokuthula didn't deny it. "I didn't mean to challenge her." Mama Eunice smiled sadly. "That is the lie we tell ourselves. The truth is, dignity doesn't ask permission." Nokuthula felt tears threaten, but she swallowed them down. "My brother is sick," she said instead. "I cannot afford to lose this job." Mama Eunice reached for her hand. "Then you must learn how to survive here without losing yourself." Survival, Nokuthula realized, came at a cost. The cost arrived sooner than expected. A few days later, Nokuthula was sent to deliver tea to Lorraine's private study. As she entered, she noticed an open folder on the desk. Names, figures, dates. She looked away immediately, but not before registering something unsettling: multiple staff salaries listed as processed, though she knew they had not been paid. That night, Nokuthula approached Kwame Boateng, the mid-level accountant she had seen often near the staff quarters. Kwame was Ghanaian, soft-spoken, with eyes that constantly searched for exits. "Excuse me," Nokuthula said carefully. "May I ask you something?" Kwame stiffened. "You shouldn't ask me anything. I just want to understand," she said. "Some staff haven't been paid." Kwame glanced around, then shook his head. "Please, forget what you saw." "So it's true," Nokuthula whispered. Kwame's silence confirmed it. "They mark it as handled," he said finally, voice tight. "If someone complains, they are replaced. That's how it's always been. Why hasn't anyone reported it?" Kwame laughed bitterly. Reported to whom Madame Lorraine chairs the Internal Welfare Committee. And the CEO, he stopped himself. Doesn't ask, Nokuthula finished. Kwame met her eyes, fear naked on his face. If you value your job, stay quiet. Nokuthula returned to her room that night, unable to sleep. The rules of silence pressed harder than ever. But now she knew the truth, and truth had weight. The next morning, Lorraine summoned Nokuthula unexpectedly. You have been asking questions, Lorraine said, circling her like a predator. That is dangerous. I only wanted to help, Nokuthula replied carefully. Lorraine smiled thinly. Help yourself. Remember your place. Sebastian entered the room just in time to catch the end of the exchange. He paused, sensing tension. Is there a problem? He asked. Lorraine's smile widened. No, darling. Just reminding staff of expectations. Sebastian nodded, though something in Nokuthula's posture caught his attention. She wasn't defiant. She wasn't submissive either. She was steady. As Sebastian walked away, the image followed him, the same steady gaze from the lobby, the same quiet presence that refused to shrink. That night, Nokuthula sat beside Sifo again, listening to the steady beep of machines. What's wrong? Sifo asked gently. Nokuthula hesitated. Have you ever felt like staying quiet is the same as lying? Sifo considered this. Sometimes, he said, but sometimes telling the truth costs too much. Nokuthula looked at her brother's fragile face and knew he was right. And yet, back at Kingsley Holdings, silence was already costing lives in ways no one counted. Lorraine Kingsley had ruled by fear for years. She did not yet realize that fear had met its quiet match. Nokuthula Mbatha returned to work the next morning with the rules clear in her mind and a choice forming slowly in her heart. Nokuthula Mbatha did not intend to become visible. Visibility was dangerous in a house ruled by someone like Lorraine Kingsley. Yet the more Nokuthula tried to follow the rules, the more her presence seemed to irritate Lorraine, as if quiet dignity itself were an act of rebellion. It began with small things. Lorraine corrected Nokuthula in front of others, even when Nokuthula had done nothing wrong. She reassigned her tasks without explanation, sending her from floor to floor until her legs ached. She inspected Nokuthula's work with a sharpness she reserved for no one else, running a finger along already spotless surfaces, searching for failure. You missed a corner, Lorraine said once, pointing to an invisible flaw. Nokuthula looked carefully, then lowered her eyes. I will redo it, madam. Lorraine smiled. You will redo everything. The other maids watched in silence. No one spoke on Nokuthula's behalf. Fear had taught them the cost of solidarity. Still, Nokuthula endured. She moved, carefully spoke softly, and did not complain. What unsettled Lorraine was not defiance, but the absence of fear in Nokuthula's eyes. One afternoon, Nokuthula found Lindiwe, a young maid barely out of her teens, crying in the laundry room. Her hands trembled so badly she dropped a basket of clean sheets. What happened? Nokuthula asked gently. Lindiwe wiped her face quickly. Madam says I'm careless. She said if I break one more thing, I'm gone. Nokuthula knelt to help her gather the sheets. You didn't do anything wrong. Lindiwe shook her head. That doesn't matter here. Lorraine appeared in the doorway, drawn by the sound. What is this? She asked coolly. Nokuthula stood. Madam Lindiwe slipped. I was helping her. Lorraine's gaze hardened. Did I ask for an explanation? No, Madam, Nokuthula replied, but she. Lorraine raised a hand. You are not her advocate. The room went still. Sebastian Adewale Kingsley walked past the open doorway at that moment. He slowed, hearing Lorraine's tone. What's going on? He asked. Lorraine turned, her expression transforming instantly. Nothing at all, just reminding staff of their duties. Sebastian's eyes flicked briefly to Nokuthula. then to Lindue's red face and shaking hands. He said nothing. He rarely did. But later that evening, Sebastian found himself thinking about the moment again. He told himself it was trivial. Household discipline was not his concern. Yet the image lingered: Lorraine's calm cruelty, Nokuthula's steady posture. Lorraine noticed his distraction. "You've been quiet," she said over dinner, swirling wine in her glass. "Just tired," Sebastian replied. She studied him for a second too long, then smiled. "Don't let the staff burden you. That's my responsibility." The next morning, Lorraine decided to test Nokuthula. She called all the domestic staff into the main sitting room, a rare and ominous summons. Nokuthula felt the shift immediately, the tight shoulders, the lowered eyes. Lorraine stood at the center, immaculate and composed. "There has been a pattern of insubordination," she said calmly. "A dangerous one." Her gaze settled on Nokuthula. "Certain staff members," Lorraine continued, "have forgotten their place." Nokuthula felt the room turn toward her like a held breath. "I value loyalty," Lorraine said, "and obedience." She turned to Nokuthula. "Kneel." The word echoed in the silence. Nokuthula's heart pounded. She thought of Sifo's hospital bed, of unpaid bills, of Mama Eunice's warning. Slowly, Nokuthula lifted her eyes. "I'm sorry, madam," she said, her voice steady. "I cannot." A sharp intake of breath rippled through the room. Lorraine laughed softly. "You cannot. I will correct mistakes," Nokuthula continued. "I will work harder, but I will not kneel." For a moment, Lorraine stared at her, disbelief flickering across her face before hardening into rage. Sebastian entered the room, just then drawn by the unusual gathering. "What's happening?" he asked. Lorraine turned to him, her voice smooth. "Your maid is refusing a direct instruction." Sebastian looked at Nokuthula. She did not look away. He hesitated just a fraction too long. "Nokuthula," he said carefully, "perhaps it's best to do as you're told." The words landed like a quiet blow. Nokuthula nodded once. "Yes, sir." She did not kneel. Instead, she turned and walked out of the room. No one stopped her. Lorraine's face burned with humiliation. This was not how power worked. Not here, not to her. From that moment on, Nokuthula became a target. Her duties doubled, her breaks vanished, her mistakes, real or imagined, were documented. Rumors began circulating quietly that Nokuthula was disrespectful, unstable, ungrateful. Kwame Boateng warned her in a hushed voice near the storeroom. "They're watching you," "I know," Nokuthula replied. Mama Eunice pressed a folded cloth into Nokuthula's hands one evening. "For your feet," she said softly. "You're being worked too hard." Nokuthula smiled gratefully. "Thank you." At home, Sifo noticed the change immediately. "You're thinner," he said. "And you don't sleep." Nokuthula brushed it off. "It's just work." Sifo studied her face. "Be careful," he said quietly. "Some battles don't look like battles until it's too late." Back at Kingsley Holdings, Sebastian found himself increasingly uncomfortable. Reports crossed his desk: staff complaints, framed as inefficiencies, payroll discrepancies explained away as administrative delays. He signed where Lorraine told him to sign. He trusted her, but trust, he was learning, had blind spots. One evening, he passed Nokuthula in the corridor, carrying supplies far heavier than her frame should bear. She struggled, adjusting her grip. Sebastian stopped. "Someone else should handle that." Nokuthula paused, surprised. "It's all right, sir." He nodded, then hesitated. "You spoke in the lobby," he said quietly. Why Nokuthula met his eyes. Because no one else did. The answer followed him long after she walked away. Lorraine noticed the shift immediately. The questions, the pauses, the way Sebastian watched instead of dismissing. She tightened her grip. Power, after all, was never surrendered willingly. And Nokuthula Mbatha, quiet, poor, unbowed, had become something far more dangerous than a disobedient maid. She had become a mirror. Secrets had a way of revealing themselves to those who worked quietly in the shadows. Nokuthula Mbatha never meant to uncover anything dangerous. She was not searching for proof, nor planning resistance. All she wanted was stability, enough money to keep Sifo alive, enough peace to last one more month. But when power is abused openly, truth leaks through the smallest cracks. The first crack appeared in the staff payment room. Once a month, domestic workers lined up to sign for their wages. Nokuthula noticed the pattern immediately. Names were called, signatures were taken, but when envelopes were handed out, some were thinner than others. Some did not arrive at all. "Come back next week," the clerk said, without looking up. Next week became next month. Mama Eunice was one of those affected. So was Lindawi, and two others who had worked in the residence longer than Nokuthula. "Has this happened?" before Nokuthula asked quietly, one evening as they folded laundry together. Mama Eunice let out a tired breath. "Many times. But why doesn't anyone report it?" Mama Eunice smiled sadly, because the complaint always goes back to the same place. That place was Lorraine Kingsley's office. Nokuthula confirmed it accidentally. One afternoon, she was sent to clean Lorraine's private study while Lorraine attended a charity luncheon. Nokuthula worked carefully, touching nothing unnecessary. But as she wiped the edge of the desk, a folder slid slightly open. She froze. Inside were spreadsheets, staff names, salary amounts, dates marked processed. Nokuthula recognized the names immediately. Mama Eunice, Lindawi, hers. Yet she knew the money had not reached them. Her heart raced. She closed the folder instantly, as if it might burn her hands. She did not look again. She did not need to. That night, Nokuthula sought out Kwame Boateng. Kwame worked late. Most evenings, shoulders hunched, glasses slipping down his nose as he stared at numbers that refused to stay innocent. Nokuthula waited until the office was nearly empty. "Mr. Boateng," she said softly, "may I speak with you?" Kwame stiffened. "You shouldn't. I won't take much time." He hesitated, then nodded once. 5 minutes. Nokuthula told him what she had seen carefully without accusation. Kwame listened, his face growing tight. "You didn't see anything," he said finally. "But it's real," Nokuthula replied. "People aren't being paid." Kwame rubbed his forehead. "I know. Then why? Because speaking costs more than silence," he snapped, then lowered his voice. "Do you think I haven't tried to fix this? The accounts are adjusted, rerouted, approved by Madame Lorraine." Kwame did not answer. He didn't have to. "She controls internal welfare," he said quietly. "Charity funds, staff allowances, everything that looks generous on paper." Nokuthula felt a chill, and the CAO Kwame laughed bitterly. "Mr. Kingsley signs what he's given. He trusts her." Trust, Nokuthula realized, was Lorraine's sharpest weapon. The next morning, Lorraine summoned Nokuthula unexpectedly. She sat behind her desk, composed, elegant, as if nothing in the world could threaten her. "You've been curious," Lorraine said lightly. Nokuthula kept her eyes down. "No, madam." Lorraine stood and circled her slowly. "Curiosity leads to misunderstanding. Misunderstanding leads to consequences." "I only do my work," Nokuthula replied. Lorraine stopped in front of her. "You forget your position." "I know my position," Nokuthula said quietly. "I just don't forget my conscience." The silence was sharp. Lorraine's smile vanished. "Conscience," she repeated. "That's a luxury for people who don't need this job." Nokuthula said nothing, but Lorraine saw it, the refusal to shrink. From that day on, the pressure intensified. Nokuthula's name disappeared from shift rotations. Her meals were withheld. Tasks meant for 3 people were assigned to her alone. The message was clear: leave or break. At the hospital, Sifo's condition worsened. We need the payment by Friday, the nurse said gently. Otherwise, we can't continue the treatment. Nokuthula nodded, her chest tightening. She counted her savings twice. It wasn't enough. She went to work the next day with swollen eyes and steady hands. Lorraine noticed immediately. Problems, she asked sweetly during breakfast. My brother is sick, Nokuthula replied, unable to stop herself. Lorraine paused. How unfortunate. Then she smiled. Perhaps you should focus on gratitude instead of defiance. Nokuthula understood the threat. That evening, Mama Eunice found her sitting alone in the storeroom. She knows about Sifo, Nokuthula whispered. Mama Eunice sat beside her. Then she is capable of anything. What do I do? Nokuthula asked. Mama Eunice reached for her hand. You decide what kind of woman you will be when this is over. Across the city, Sebastian Adewale Kingsley stared at a set of financial reports that refused to align. Numbers blurred together, and for the first time he felt uncertainty creep in. He called Kwame into his office. These delays, Sebastian said. They're increasing. Kwame swallowed. Yes, sir. Why? Kwame hesitated. Fear flickered across his face. Sebastian noticed. Is there something I should know? Sebastian asked. Kwame opened his mouth, then closed it. Everything is under control, sir. Sebastian nodded, but the answer felt hollow. Later that night, he found Lorraine reviewing documents with practiced ease. The staff seem unsettled, he said casually. Lorraine didn't look up. They always are. And the charity accounts. She smiled. Flawless. Sebastian watched her for a long moment. You're certain? Do you doubt me? Lorraine asked, meeting his eyes. No, he said automatically. But doubt had already taken root. Meanwhile, Nokuthula stood at the edge of a decision she had never wanted to make. Silence would keep her employed for now. Speaking out could cost her everything. She looked at Sifo, sleeping under thin hospital sheets, and felt the weight of choice settle heavily on her chest. I promise, she whispered to him. Whatever happens, I won't let them erase us. Back at Kingsley Holdings, Lorraine Kingsley believed she had tightened the net. She did not yet realize that the truth Nokuthula carried was heavier than fear and far harder to contain. Lorraine Kingsley decided that silence was no longer enough. If Nokuthula Mbatha would not bend quietly, then she would be broken publicly. The opportunity came on a Monday morning when the residents buzzed with unusual activity. A delegation from one of Sebastian Adewale Kingsley's partner companies was expected to tour the private floors before a strategy luncheon. Lorraine moved through the house with sharpened precision. Her voice calm, her instructions clipped. Nokuthula was assigned to the main sitting room, polishing surfaces that already gleamed, aligning cushions that no one would touch. She worked steadily, aware of eyes tracking her movements. Mama Eunice passed by once and squeezed her hand briefly. Be careful, she whispered. Nokuthula nodded. The delegation arrived on time. Suits and soft laughter filled the room. Sebastian greeted them with his practiced ease, every gesture measured. Lorraine followed at his side, radiant and composed, playing the role she had perfected. Then Lorraine stopped. Her gaze fell on a small glass table near the window. There, she said sharply, pointing. That's filthy. The room stilled. Nokuthula looked confused. The surface was spotless. I cleaned it twice, Nokuthula said carefully. Lorraine turned slowly. Are you contradicting me? No, Madam Nokuthula replied. I'm explaining. Lorraine smiled, a thin, dangerous curve of her lips. Explanation suggests you believe your judgment equals mine. Sebastian felt the shift immediately. He glanced between them, sensing tension but unsure where it had begun. Lorraine, he said quietly, we have guests. Precisely, Lorraine replied. She raised her voice just enough for the room to hear. I won't tolerate incompetence in front of our partners. She turned to Nokuthula. Apologize. Now. The delegation fell silent. Eyes flicked toward Nokuthula, curiosity mixed with discomfort. Nokuthula felt her heart race. She thought of Sifo, of the hospital bills folded in her bag, of the many times she had swallowed her words to survive. "I'm sorry if there's an issue," she said slowly, "but I did my work properly." A murmur rippled through the room. Lorraine's expression hardened. "Kneel," she said again, louder this time, "and apologize." Time seemed to stretch. Nokuthula felt every eye on her back, the weight of expectation pressing down. She looked at the floor. Then she straightened. "I will apologize for mistakes," she said clearly. "But I will not kneel for doing my job." The silence that followed was absolute. Sebastian's breath caught. This was no longer a private matter. It was unfolding in front of witnesses. Lorraine laughed, a sound sharp enough to cut. "You are a servant," she said. "Your dignity exists because I allow it." Nokuthula met her gaze. "My dignity exists because I am human." The words landed like a blow. Sebastian stepped forward. "Enough," he said, his voice controlled. "This isn't appropriate." Lorraine turned to him, eyes blazing. "You're defending her. I'm asking for discretion," Sebastian replied. "Not a spectacle." Lorraine smiled tightly. "Then let's be discreet." She turned back to Nokuthula. "You're dismissed, effective immediately." A collective inhale swept the room. Nokuthula's chest tightened. She bowed her head once. "Yes, madam." As she turned to leave, Sebastian spoke again. "Lorraine." She cut him off with a glance. "This is my household." Nokuthula walked out with steady steps, though her legs trembled beneath her. She did not look back. In the corridor, her composure cracked. Mama Eunice caught her before she fell. "She fired you," Mama Eunice whispered. "Not yet," Nokuthula replied, her voice thin. "But she will." By evening, the message had spread. Nokuthula's access card was deactivated. Her name removed from the roster. Her final pay withheld pending review. Kwame Boateng found her near the service exit, panic etched into his face. "You challenged her in front of outsiders," he said. "She won't forgive that." "I didn't plan to," Nokuthula replied. At the hospital, Sifo's condition deteriorated. "We need confirmation of payment," the doctor said gently, "or we'll have to move him to general care." Nokuthula nodded numbly. That night she returned to the small room she shared with Sifo and broke down for the first time in years. The tears came hard and fast, fueled by exhaustion and fear. "I tried," she whispered. "I really tried." Sifo reached for her hand, weak but warm. "You didn't do anything wrong," he said. "You stood up." Standing up, Nokuthula realized, had consequences no one warned you about. Back at Kingsley Holdings, Sebastian sat alone in his office, long after everyone had gone home. The image of Nokuthula's calm defiance replayed in his mind, clashing violently with Lorraine's certainty. He reviewed the guest feedback from the delegation. One note stood out: uncomfortable scene. Questionable treatment of staff. Sebastian frowned. He opened the payroll reports again, tracing discrepancies he had previously ignored. Numbers that once felt abstract now carried faces. Mama Eunice, Lindaway, Nokuthula. For the first time he wondered what it meant to be powerful and silent. Lorraine, meanwhile, was already planning her next move. "People like her," she said aloud to her reflection, "must be taught lessons." She contacted security. "Monitor her," she instructed. "I want to know where she goes, who she speaks to." Fear, she believed, could still win. But fear had already met resistance. Nokuthula spent the next days searching for work, moving from house to house, office to office. Doors closed quietly. References disappeared. Whispers followed her. "She's difficult," someone said. "She challenged her employer," said another. At night she sat beside Sifo. reading to him softly, hiding her desperation behind steady words. Mama Eunice visited when she could, bringing food, offering comfort. "You shook the house," Mama Eunice said one evening. "They felt it." Nokuthula smiled faintly. "I don't feel strong. Strength doesn't feel like strength when you're carrying it," Mama Eunice replied. Across town, Sebastian made a decision he had avoided for years. He called barrister Tunde Akinwele. "I need you to look into something," Sebastian said carefully. Quietly, Tunde paused. "What kind of something?" Sebastian exhaled. "The kind that tells me whether I've been blind." As the city settled into night, lines were being drawn between silence and truth, fear and dignity, power and conscience. And at the center of it all stood Nokuthula Mbatha, no longer employed, no longer protected, yet still unbowed. The house did not collapse when Nokuthula Mbatha left it. That was the cruelest lesson of all. Kingsley Holdings continued to function with its polished calm. Floors gleamed. Meetings ran on time. Lorraine Kingsley hosted a brunch 2 days later, laughing easily as if nothing had happened. To the outside world, order remained intact. But beneath the surface, something had shifted. For the first time in years, the staff spoke quietly, cautiously in fragments. Mama Eunice Okafor felt it first. In the laundry room, whispers lingered longer than usual. In the corridors, eyes met for half a second before darting away. Fear still ruled, but it no longer felt invincible. She walked out. Someone murmured. She didn't beg, another replied. Mama Eunice said nothing. She folded sheets with deliberate care, carrying a truth she did not yet know how to use. Nokuthula spent her days moving across the city with Sifo's hospital invoice folded in her bag, like a fragile promise. She applied for cleaning jobs, kitchen work, anything that paid cash. Each rejection landed quietly, but deeply. "We'll call you," they said. They never did. By the 4th day, she understood what Lorraine had done. Her name had been marked, not formally, never in writing, but enough to close doors. That evening, Kwame Boateng found her sitting on the steps outside the hospital, staring at the traffic without seeing it. "I shouldn't be here," he said, glancing around. "You came anyway," Nokuthula replied. Kwame sat beside her, his shoulders tense. "People are talking. About me, about what you did," he said, "about how she fired you, about the wages." Nokuthula turned to him. "Then it's working." Kwame shook his head. "No, it's dangerous." He hesitated, then pulled a folded envelope from his jacket. "These are copies, not originals, payroll summaries, charity transfers." Nokuthula's breath caught. "Why are you giving me this?" "Because I'm tired of pretending I don't see it," Kwame said quietly. "And because you were the first one who didn't look afraid." Nokuthula took the envelope with shaking hands. "If they find out, they already suspect me," Kwame said. "Suspicion is just another kind of prison." Inside the hospital room, Sifo slept lightly, his breathing uneven. Nokuthula sat beside him that night, the envelope heavy in her lap. "I don't know how to use this," she whispered. Sifo opened his eyes slowly. "Then find someone who does." The next morning, Mama Eunice made a choice she had postponed for years. She went to see barrister Tunde Akinwele. Tunde's office overlooked the city, modest compared to the towers of corporate power, but grounded. He listened without interruption as Mama Eunice spoke, her voice steady despite the weight of memory behind it. "I have worked there for 12 years, she said. "I have watched people disappear. I have watched wages vanish. I stayed quiet because I needed to eat." Tunde folded his hands. And now, Mama Eunice said, "I am tired of surviving at the cost of my soul." She slid Nokuthula's name across the desk. This girl stood up, not for herself, for another Maid. That is not common. Tunde nodded slowly. "I'm already involved," he said. Mama Eunice looked up sharply. How the CEO asked me to review certain internal matters, Tunde replied, quietly. Hope flickered fragile, but real. Lorraine Kingsley felt the change before she saw it. Kwame's hesitation in meetings, Mama Eunice's absence from her usual routes, the way Sebastian now asked questions he had never asked before. She responded as she always did, by tightening control. Kwame was summoned to a performance review. His access to certain accounts was revoked. Security began trailing Mama Eunice at a careful distance, and Nokuthula received a message. It arrived as a phone call from an unfamiliar number. "You should stop," the voice said, calmly. "For your brother's sake." Nokuthula's blood ran cold. "Who is this someone who knows how hospitals work?" The voice replied, then disconnected. She rushed to Sifo's room. A nurse met her at the door, uneasy. "There's been a delay," the nurse said. "An administrative issue." Nokuthula understood immediately. Lorraine had found her leverage. That night, Nokuthula sat alone in a small cafe near the hospital. The envelope of documents spread across the table. Her hands shook. If she went forward, Sifo could suffer. If she stayed silent, the system would continue untouched. Mama Eunice joined her quietly. "You look like someone standing at the edge of a cliff," Mama Eunice said. "I am Nokuthula," replied, "and I'm not the only one who will fall." Mama Eunice placed her hand over Nokuthula's. "When I was young, my mother told me something. She said, 'Fear will ask you what you love most, and threaten it.'" Nokuthula swallowed. "What did you do?" "I chose not to let fear decide who I was," Mama Eunice said gently. "The cost was high, but the cost of silence was higher." Across town, Sebastian Adewale Kingsley reviewed preliminary findings from Tunde. The numbers were troubling, the patterns unmistakable. "This isn't incompetence," Sebastian said quietly. "No," Tunde replied. "It's design." Sebastian leaned back, a heaviness settling in his chest. Faces rose in his mind staff. He had never learned the names of the maid who had spoken in the lobby. "Nokuthula Mbatha," he said aloud. "Yes," Tunde confirmed. "She's central to this." Sebastian closed his eyes briefly. For the first time he saw his silence not as neutrality but as permission. Lorraine entered the office unannounced. "You're working late," she observed. "I am," Sebastian replied. She glanced at the documents. "Anything I should be concerned about?" He met her gaze. "That depends," Lorraine smiled. "On what? On whether the truth concerns you." The smile faded just for a second. Back at the hospital, Nokuthula made her decision. She gathered the documents. She called Tunde. She spoke clearly without drama. "I'm ready," she said, "but I won't do this if my brother pays the price." Tunde paused. "I can't promise safety," he said honestly, "but I can promise exposure." Nokuthula looked at Sifo's sleeping thin chest, rising and falling. "Then let the light in," she said. As night fell, lines of loyalty and fear began to fray. Quiet alliances formed, files moved, questions multiplied. Lorraine Kingsley believed she still held the board. She did not yet realize that the weakest pieces had begun to move together. And in that movement, power was slowly changing hands. Lorraine Kingsley did not panic when she sensed resistance. She prepared. To Lorraine, fear was not an emotion, it was a tool, a language she spoke fluently. And once she realized Nokuthula Mbatha was no longer just a dismissed maid, but a spark moving through the shadows, Lorraine decided to smother it before it became a fire. The first target was the easiest one, Sifo Mbatha. Nokuthula found out on a Tuesday morning when she arrived at the hospital with a small bag of fruit and the last of her cash tucked into her bra. The hallway smelled of antiseptic and tired hope. Nurses moved briskly, their faces careful. At Sifo's door, a receptionist stopped her. "Ms. Mbatha," the woman said, glancing down at her clipboard. "There's a change." Nokuthula's stomach tightened. What kind of change? The receptionist hesitated, then lowered her voice. Your brother's file has been flagged for review. It's administrative, they say, but it means treatment can be delayed until the review is cleared. Nokuthula stared. Flagged by who? The receptionist shook her head, eyes apologetic. It didn't come from us. A cold wave moved through Nokuthula's body. The threat from the anonymous phone call returned for your brother's sake. She entered Sifo's room, forcing her face into calm. Sifo's eyes were half open, his skin dry, his breathing shallow. You look like you've been running, he whispered. I'm fine, Nokuthula lied, taking his hand. How are you feeling? Sifo tried to smile, like I'm borrowing air. Nokuthula swallowed hard. She wanted to tell him everything, to confess how close the world was to taking him again. But fear was listening, and it lived in every corner. That afternoon, Nokuthula met Mama Eunice Okafor and Kwame Boateng in the back of a small church near Soweto. It was quiet there, the kind of quiet that felt like protection. Kwame looked worse than before. His eyes were sunken, his fingers trembling as he unfolded more papers. They reduced my access, he said. I can't pull everything anymore. Mama Eunice squeezed his shoulder. You've already done more than most. Nokuthula spoke carefully, forcing her voice steady. Sifo's treatment is being delayed. Someone flagged his file. They all knew who that someone was. Kwame exhaled sharply. Lorraine. She wants to teach you a lesson, Mama Eunice said, her voice bitter. She's done this before, not with hospitals but with rent, with police, with papers. She knows where to press. Nokuthula stared down at her hands. Then what do we do? Kwame hesitated, then said, we speed up. Before she closes every door. They needed a plan, not courage alone structure. Mama Eunice glanced toward the church altar. There are times, she said softly, when God doesn't remove the storm. He teaches you how to walk through it. Nokuthula didn't answer. Her faith wasn't theatrical. It was quiet, like her. But she felt the weight of the storm pressing. That same evening, Barrister Tunde Akinwele met with Sebastian Adewale Kingsley in a private conference room high above the city. The lights were low. The city glittered beneath them like a promise and a lie. Tunde slid a folder across the table. These are not rumors, he said. They are trails, payroll irregularities, charity transfers that don't match disbursements, staff wages marked paid not received. Sebastian stared at the documents, jaw tightening. This is extensive, Tunde nodded. And there's intimidation. Witnesses are terrified. Sebastian leaned back, staring into nothing. His mind returned to the lobby, the slap, the silence, Nokuthula's voice cutting through it. She knew, he murmured. She suspects, Tunde corrected. And she's willing to stand up despite what it costs. Sebastian's throat tightened. How is that possible? Tunde's gaze was steady. Sometimes the poor understand power better than the rich. They live under it. Sebastian exhaled, then asked the question he had avoided for years. What would exposure mean? It would mean conflict, Tunde replied. Public, ugly conflict. Your wife will fight. She has influence, allies, a polished image. Sebastian nodded slowly. And if I do nothing, Tunde didn't soften his words, then you remain complicit. Sebastian looked away. Complicit. The word felt heavy. Accurate, unforgiving. Lorraine, meanwhile, was moving with her own speed. She met with a discreet private investigator in a luxury cafe, keeping her tone casual. I want everything on Nokuthula Mbatha, she said. School records, past employers, family connections, and anyone she has been meeting. The investigator nodded. And what will you do with it? Lorraine smiled faintly. I'll remind her where she belongs. By the end of the week, Nokuthula's phone began receiving messages from unknown numbers. We know where your brother is. Stop talking. You don't want him to suffer." Nokuthula deleted them, but the fear remained buzzing under her skin like electricity. On Friday, she arrived at the hospital to find Sifo's bed being moved. "Where are you taking him?" she demanded, voice rising. A nurse looked uncomfortable. "To general care," she said, "until the review clears." General care meant fewer resources, less monitoring, more risk. Nokuthula's vision blurred. She stepped into the hallway, breathing hard, trying not to collapse. Mama Eunice arrived minutes later, her face pale. "I heard," she said softly. Nokuthula's voice cracked. "She's killing him!" Mama Eunice grabbed her shoulders firmly. "Listen to me. Lorraine wants you to blame yourself. She wants you to break." Nokuthula stared at her. "How do I not break when my brother is being taken from me?" Mama Eunice's eyes shone. "Because your brother needs you whole, not quiet." Whole. That night, Nokuthula sat in the hospital chapel, alone. The room was empty except for the faint glow of candles someone had left burning. Nokuthula pressed her forehead to her hands. She didn't pray for revenge. She didn't ask for miracles. She asked for strength. When she lifted her head, she knew what she had to do. If Lorraine had chosen Sifo as her weapon, then Nokuthula would respond with the only thing stronger than fear: truth placed in the right hands at the right time. The next morning, Nokuthula met Barrister Tunde in person for the first time. He studied her carefully, the worn shoes, the tired eyes, the posture that refused to collapse. "You understand what this will cost," Tunde said. Nokuthula nodded. "It already cost me everything." Tunde offered her a chair. "Then tell me everything you know. From the beginning." Nokuthula spoke for over an hour. About wages, about intimidation, about Lorraine's cruelty and Sebastian's silence, about the lobby, about the threats, about Sifo. Tunde listened without interruption. When she finished, he leaned back slowly. "This is bigger than the house," he said. "It touches the company, the foundation, possibly external partners." Nokuthula's hands trembled. "Then why hasn't anyone stopped her?" Tunde's voice was calm. "Because powerful people survive by making others believe resistance is impossible." Nokuthula swallowed. "But it isn't." "No," Tunde agreed. "It's just expensive." Across the city, Sebastian stood alone in his penthouse staring out at the skyline. Lorraine's world. His world. The world he had built by choosing silence whenever conflict threatened his peace. And now a poor maid, Nokuthula Mbatha, was forcing him to face the cost of that peace. He picked up his phone and dialed a number. "Prepare an emergency internal audit," he said quietly. "Not through the usual channels." The voice on the other end hesitated. "So, Madame Lorraine." "Not through the usual channels," Sebastian repeated, colder this time. He ended the call and felt something unfamiliar settle in his chest. Resolve. Lorraine, however, was already sensing the shift. A storm didn't always announce itself with thunder. Sometimes it arrived as silence changing shape, and Nokuthula, standing at Sifo's bedside, knew one thing clearly. Now Lorraine could threaten what she loved most, but she could no longer control who Nokuthula chose to be. The charity gala was everything Lorraine Kingsley wanted it to be. Elegant, controlled, and dazzling enough to blind anyone who looked too closely. Held in the grand ballroom of a five-star hotel overlooking the city, the event celebrated the 10th anniversary of the Kingsley Foundation, an organization praised for uplifting the underprivileged. Crystal chandeliers reflected soft gold light over silk gowns and tailored suits. Cameras flashed. Laughter floated easily through the room. Lorraine moved among the guests like royalty, her smile perfected through years of practice. She spoke of compassion, of opportunity, of her deep commitment to workers' welfare. Applause followed her every word. Sebastian Adewale Kingsley stood beside her, composed as ever, though the air around him felt heavier than usual. He smiled when required, shook hands, posed for photographs. But his eyes kept drifting to the staff, lining the edges of the ballroom, moving silently between tables. Nokuthula Mbatha was among them. She had not planned to be there. When Mama Eunice told her the foundation needed temporary staff for the gala, Nokuthula hesitated, but they needed money. Sifo's situation was worsening by the day, and this was cash paid at the end of the night. No forms, no records. She wore a borrowed uniform that fit a little too loosely and kept her head down as she served drinks and cleared plates. The ballroom was a different world from the service corridors she knew yet. The hierarchy felt the same. Lorraine saw her almost immediately. For half a second, surprise flickered across her face. Then control returned. "So you're still breathing," Lorraine thought coolly. She said nothing. Not yet. As Nokuthula moved through the room, she listened. Years of quiet survival had trained her well. Donors praised Lorraine's generosity. Board members spoke in hushed tones about expansion and influence. A few mentioned internal adjustments and temporary delays. Nokuthula filed the words away. At one table near the center of the room, she paused to refill water glasses. A man seated there looked up at her not with entitlement, but with curiosity. This was Barrister Tunde Akinwele. Their eyes met for a brief moment. Nokuthula recognized him instantly. He gave a subtle nod, nothing that would draw attention. Just acknowledgement. She continued working. On stage, Lorraine took the microphone. Tonight, she said warmly, "We celebrate impact. Not just numbers on a page, but lives changed." Applause filled the room. Nokuthula felt a familiar tightening in her chest. She thought of Mama Eunice's delayed wages, of Lindewe disappearing without explanation, of Sifo's hospital bed being wheeled away. "Lives changed," she repeated silently. Sebastian listened to Lorraine speak her words, now echoing uncomfortably against the findings Tunde had shared. The contrast was sharp, almost unbearable. He scanned the room again and found Nokuthula. She stood near the back, balancing a tray, her posture straight, despite the weight. Their eyes met briefly. Something passed between them. Recognition, perhaps, or accountability. Sebastian looked away first. As the evening progressed, the atmosphere loosened. Wine flowed. Conversations grew louder, and with comfort came carelessness. At a table near the stage, two donors spoke freely, assuming no one was listening. "They keep the overhead low," one said. "Staff costs are practically invisible." Lorraine's methods praised as efficiency. Nokuthula memorized every word. Near the kitchen entrance, Mama Eunice moved quietly, counting trays, eyes sharp. When Nokuthula passed her, Mama Eunice murmured, "Security is watching you." "I know," Nokuthula replied without stopping. At the far end of the room, Lorraine finally made her move. She approached Nokuthula as she cleared a table, her smile fixed and bright. "Enjoying the evening?" Lorraine asked lightly. Nokuthula lowered her head. "Yes, madam." Lorraine leaned closer, her voice dropping. "You seem to have a habit of appearing where you don't belong." "I'm working," Nokuthula replied simply. Lorraine straightened. "So you are." She turned away, but not before adding softly, "Careful. Accidents happen in crowded rooms." Nokuthula's hands tightened around the tray. Moments later, a commotion rippled near the stage. A glass shattered. Guests gasped. Lorraine turned sharply. "Who did that?" she demanded. A waiter pointed hesitant, uncertain toward Nokuthula. "She was standing there," he said. The room stilled. Lorraine seized the moment. "This is exactly what I mean," she said loudly, addressing the guests. "Irresponsibility, disrespect for spaces meant to honor generosity." All eyes turned to Nokuthula. Sebastian's heart sank. Nokuthula stepped forward, her voice calm despite the pounding in her chest. "The glass slipped when someone bumped into me." Lorraine smiled. Excuses again. Security moved closer. Sebastian took a step forward. Lorraine. She cut him off with a raised hand. Not now. The tension was thick enough to taste. Then Tundakinwele stood. May I? He said, his voice carrying easily across the room. Lorraine froze. Of course, barrister. Tunde looked at Nokuthula, then at Lorraine, then at the guests. I happened to be watching, he said. The staff member was not at fault. A murmur spread. Lorraine's smile faltered. This isn't necessary. On the contrary, Tunde replied evenly. Accuracy always is. He turned back to Nokuthula. You may continue your work. For a heartbeat, the world held still. Nokuthula nodded once and stepped away. Lorraine's face tightened, fury flashing beneath the polish. She recovered quickly, laughing lightly. Well, let's not let small mishaps distract us from our mission. Applause followed, uneasy, but obedient. Behind-the-scenes lines were shifting. Later that night, as guests departed and the ballroom emptied, Sebastian found Nokuthula near the service exit. You shouldn't have been put in that position, he said quietly. Nokuthula met his eyes. It wasn't new. Sebastian hesitated. I'm looking into things. She studied him for a moment. Looking isn't the same as acting, he nodded. I know. At the hospital, Sifo's condition worsened again. The nurse called Nokuthula shortly after midnight. She's accelerating, Mama Eunice said when Nokuthula told her. She senses time slipping. Back at the hotel, Lorraine watched security footage from the gala. Her expression cold. Prepare the documents, she instructed over the phone. If she wants attention, she'll get it. As Nokuthula sat beside Sifo's bed that night holding his fragile hand, she felt fear press in. But it no longer owned her. The gala had revealed what Lorraine feared most. Witnesses. And once people began to see, they could no longer unsee. The storm was no longer gathering. It had arrived. Lorraine Kingsley, struck before anyone could prepare for it. The morning after the gala, Nokuthula Mbatha was summoned to the security office at Kingsley Holdings. The message came through. Mama Eunice delivered with a pale face and shaking hands. They say it's urgent, Mama Eunice whispered, and it doesn't feel right. Nokuthula felt it too. The tightening in her chest, the familiar warning that danger was no longer abstract. Still, she went. Fear had already taken enough from her. She would not give it obedience as well. The security office was cold and windowless. 2 guards stood by the door. On the table between them lay a small velvet pouch. Lorraine sat across from Nokuthula, perfectly composed. Do you recognize this? Lorraine asked, opening the pouch. Inside was a diamond bracelet Nokuthula had seen Lorraine wear countless times. No, Madame Nokuthula replied. Lorraine tilted her head. Interesting, because it was found in the staff locker assigned to you. Nokuthula's heart dropped. That's impossible, is it? Lorraine asked calmly. Security footage places you near my dressing room yesterday evening. Nokuthula shook her head. I was working in the ballroom. Which gives you access, Lorraine replied smoothly. Sebastian Adewale Kingsley entered the room at that moment, his expression already strained. What's going on? He asked. Lorraine turned to him, eyes glistening with rehearsed disappointment. I didn't want to involve you, but the evidence is unfortunate. She gestured to the bracelet. Sebastian looked at Nokuthula. Did you take it? No, Nokuthula said firmly. I didn't, Lorraine sighed. Denial is expected. Nokuthula's hands trembled, but her voice did not. You planted it. The room went silent. Lorraine laughed softly. Be careful, girl. Sebastian rubbed his forehead. Is there proof? The head of security cleared his throat. We have footage of Ms. Mbatha entering the corridor outside Mrs. Kingsley's dressing room. That corridor leads to the staff washroom, Nokuthula said quickly. Lorraine waved a hand. Details. Sebastian felt the weight of the moment pressing in. Board members were arriving upstairs. Reporters lingered outside the building after the gala. Any scandal, real or perceived, could erupt. Nokuthula, he said quietly. If you return the item now, we can resolve this internally. Nokuthula stared at him, disbelief flashing across her face. You're asking me to confess to something I didn't do. I'm asking you to help me contain this, Sebastian replied. The words hurt more than Lorraine's cruelty. I won't lie, Nokuthula said. Not anymore. Lorraine's eyes hardened. Then you leave me no choice. She turned to security. Contact the police. Mama Eunice, standing near the doorway, gasped. Madam, please, enough, Lorraine snapped. She made her choice. Within an hour, Nokuthula was escorted out of the building. Phones were raised. Whispers spread. By noon, the story had begun to circulate through internal channels. Domestic worker caught stealing from CEO's wife. Sebastian watched from his office window as Nokuthula was led away. Something inside him cracked, but the machine of power was already moving, and stopping it now would mean admitting how long he had allowed it to run. At the police station, Nokuthula sat alone in a narrow room, hands folded tightly in her lap. She explained everything calmly, the gala, the accusation, the impossibility of it all. The officer listened with polite skepticism. Do you have proof? Nokuthula shook her head. Only the truth. Truth, she learned, did not carry much weight in small rooms without windows. That evening, Mama Eunice and Kwame Boateng arrived together. Kwame looked terrified, but determined. They're trying to destroy you, he said. Lorraine sent files to HR to partner companies. She's cutting you off everywhere. Mama Eunice held Nokuthula's hands. We won't let you stand alone. At the hospital, Sifo's situation worsened. The delay in treatment had taken its toll. When Nokuthula was finally released pending investigation, she ran straight there. The doctor met her at the door. We've done what we can, he said gently, but without full care. Nokuthula sat beside Sifo, her body trembling with exhaustion. I'm sorry, she whispered. I tried to protect you. Sifo managed a weak smile. You did, he said. You showed them who you are. The next day, Lorraine escalated. Formal charges were filed. Nokuthula's name appeared in internal memos as a security risk. Temporary staff agencies blacklisted her. Even the cafe near the hospital refused her work. Sebastian read the reports in silence. Each line felt like a verdict, not just against Nokuthula, but against himself. He called barrister Tunde Akinwale. They framed her, Sebastian said bluntly. Yes, Tunde replied, and now they're overplaying their hand. What do we do? Sebastian asked. We gather proof, Tunde said, and we prepare for exposure. But the damage, Sebastian began, is already done, Tunde finished. The question is whether you'll keep letting it happen. Sebastian closed his eyes. The image of Nokuthula's steady gaze returned sharper now. That night, Lorraine celebrated quietly. Control restored. Message sent. She thought she could challenge me, Lorraine said to herself, pouring a glass of wine. No one stands up to me without paying. But, even as she spoke, cracks were forming. Kwame slipped copies of security logs into Tunde's hands. Timestamps, altered footage, spliced. Mama Eunice contacted former staff people Lorraine thought she had erased. They began to talk, and Sebastian, for the first time in his career, stopped signing what was placed in front of him. Nokuthula lay awake in the hospital chair beside Sifo, her body aching, her future uncertain. She had lost her job, her reputation, nearly her brother. Yet something inside her remained intact. She had not knelt, she had not lied, she had not disappeared. Outside, the city moved on, unaware that a reckoning was approaching. Lorraine Kingsley believed she had won. She did not yet realize that her greatest mistake was pushing the truth too far into the light. The world grew smaller for Nokuthula Mbatha after the accusation. It shrank to hospital corridors and waiting chairs to whispered conversations and long silences. Her name, once unnoticed, now carried a stain she could feel, even when no one said it aloud. People looked at her differently, some with pity, others with suspicion, most with distance. She learned quickly that innocence did not protect you from isolation. Sifo slept more now. His body, already weakened, seemed to conserve what little strength it had left. The machines beside his bed hummed steadily, indifferent to fear or injustice. Nokuthula sat with him through the nights, counting breaths, holding his hand, whispering stories from their childhood. The river near their grandmother's village, the mango tree they used to climb, the way their mother laughed even when money was short. "Do you remember?" Sifo murmured one night, eyes closed. "How Mama used to say truth is like fire." Nokuthula smiled faintly. She said it burns, but it also lights the way. Sifo squeezed her fingers weakly. "Then don't put it out." Those words stayed with her. Outside the hospital, life pressed on. Bills arrived. Notices followed. The investigation moved slowly, just enough to keep Nokuthula trapped in uncertainty. Not convicted, not cleared, Mama Eunice Okafor became her anchor. Each morning, Mama Eunice visited before her shift, bringing food news, quiet reassurance. She sat beside Nokuthula, like a sentry, unafraid of association. "They want you to feel alone," Mama Eunice said one afternoon. "Isolation is the second punishment. Shame is the third." Nokuthula nodded. "It's working." Mama Eunice shook her head. "You're still standing. That's not nothing." Kwame Boateng was not as fortunate. 2 days after Nokuthula's release, he was called into a closed-door meeting. When he emerged, his face was ashen. "They're suspending me," he said, quietly. "Audit irregularities." "They're silencing you," Nokuthula replied. Kwame gave a tired smile. "I knew the risk." That evening, Kwame sent Tunde Akinwale an encrypted file security footage, metadata, payroll timestamps, internal emails Lorraine believed had been erased. It was incomplete, but it told a story of patterns, of intent. Tun studied the files late into the night, building timelines, cross-referencing names. He saw it clearly now, the wage theft, the intimidation, the charity accounts used as cover. And at the center of it all, Lorraine Kingsley, precise, patient, ruthless. The next morning, Tunde requested a formal meeting with the board. Lorraine responded by accelerating her counterattack. She visited the hospital personally. Nokuthula was not in the room when Lorraine arrived. Mama Eunice was. The nurse froze when she saw the woman's polished presence and security detail. Lorraine smiled pleasantly. "I'm here on a charitable matter," she said. "Kingsley Foundation." Mama Eunice stood slowly. "This is a hospital room." "Yes," Lorraine replied smoothly. "And my foundation has supported many hospitals." She turned toward Sifo's bed. "Poor boy," she said softly. "Illness can be unpredictable." Mama Eunice stepped between them. "Leave." Lorraine raised an eyebrow. "Excuse me. You've done enough," Mama Eunice said, her voice steady. "Leave." For a moment, Lorraine looked almost amused. Then her eyes hardened. "You're very brave," she said quietly. "Bravery can be expensive." She turned and left without another word. When Nokuthula returned and heard what had happened, her legs nearly gave way. "She came here," Nokuthula whispered. Mama Eunice nodded. "She wanted you to see her power up close." That night, Nokuthula broke down, not in tears but in exhaustion, the kind that seeps into bones, that makes even breathing feel heavy. "I can't protect him," she said softly to Mama Eunice. "No matter what I do." Mama Eunice held her. "You're protecting him with your truth," she said, "even when it hurts." Across the city, Sebastian Adewale Kingsley faced his own reckoning. The board meeting was tense. Tund presented discrepancies without accusation. Just facts, patterns, risks. Lorraine sat calmly, hands folded, her expression serene. "These are administrative misunderstandings," she said. "We'll correct them." Sebastian watched her closely. For the first time he saw not confidence but calculation, and the intimidation. Tunda asked evenly. "Former staff report threats, withheld wages, retaliation." Lorraine turned to Sebastian, smiling. "Disgruntled employees make noise. That's nothing new." Sebastian felt the room tilt. He thought of the lobby, of the gala, of the hospital. "Enough," he said, quietly. Lorraine's head snapped toward him. "What did you say?" Sebastian straightened. "Enough. We're commissioning an independent investigation." The room fell silent. Lorraine laughed softly. "You're letting rumors guide you. I'm letting evidence guide me," Sebastian replied. Her smile vanished. "You're making a mistake." "Maybe," Sebastian said, "but it's my mistake to make." For the first time, Lorraine looked truly threatened. That evening, news of the investigation leaked. Not to the press, not yet, but to those who had been waiting. Former staff reached out. Stories poured in. Names resurfaced. Lindawe called Mama Eunice from a distant town, her voice shaking as she told her story. Others followed. Nokuthula listened as Mama Eunice relayed the news. Hope and fear tangled together. "It's moving," Mama Eunice said. "Slowly, but it's moving." Nokuthula nodded, her gaze fixed on Sifo. But movement did not mean safety. The next morning, Sifo's condition took a sudden turn for the worse. Doctors moved quickly. Alarms sounded. Nokuthula was ushered out into the hallway, heart-pounding hands clasped tightly, as if holding herself together. Hours passed. When the doctor finally emerged, his face was grave. "We stabilized him," he said. "But he's very weak. He needs consistent care. Interruptions like this, they take a toll." Nokuthula felt the weight of guilt crash over her. This was the price Lorraine wanted her to see. That night, Nokuthula sat alone in the hospital chapel again. The candles were still there, flickering softly. "I'm scared," she whispered into the empty room. Not of losing, but of losing him. For the first time she allowed herself to imagine a future without Sifo, and it nearly broke her. But even in that fear, she felt something else rising. Resolve. Lorraine had chosen the battlefield. Nokuthula had not, but she would not retreat. The next day, Nokuthula agreed to speak formally with investigators. Not in public. Not yet. But on record. She told everything again, slowly, clearly, without embellishment. When she finished, the investigator leaned back. "You know this will get worse before it gets better." Nokuthula nodded. "I know, and you're willing to continue." She thought of Sifo's hand in hers, of Mama Eunice's courage, of Kwame's sacrifice. "Yes," she said, "I am." Outside, clouds gathered over the city, heavy with promise and threat. Lorraine Kingsley felt the pressure, closing in, though she still wore her confidence like armor. She had silenced people before. She believed she could do it again. But she underestimated one thing: the quiet strength of a woman who had already lost everything and chosen truth anyway. Truth rarely arrived all at once. It emerged in fragments, documents here, testimonies there, until denial could no longer hold its shape. The independent investigation began quietly, away from cameras and headlines. Barrister Tunda Akinwale insisted on it. He had seen too many inquiries collapse under public pressure. This one, he argued, had to be built like a spine, slow, strong, unbreakable. Investigators interviewed current staff first. Most were careful. Some said little. Fear still had a voice. But fear was losing its monopoly. Mama Eunice Okafor spoke without trembling. She laid out timelines, missed wages, retaliations, names that vanished from rosters. She didn't dramatize. She didn't accuse. She simply told the truth, as she had lived it. Kwame Boateng followed his suspension still fresh. He brought logs and backups explaining how figures were altered, just enough to avoid scrutiny. How approvals were routed through Lorraine Kingsley's private channels. How questions were punished. When Nokuthula Mbatha took the seat across from the investigators, the room fell into a different kind of silence. She spoke calmly, about the lobby, about the gala, about the planted bracelet, about the threats that targeted her brother, about the way power felt when it pressed down without touching you. She did not cry. She did not plead. She testified. Outside the conference room, Sebastian Adewale Kingsley paced the corridor. Each account landed like a stone in his chest. He had built a company on efficiency and reputation. He had trusted the systems closest to him, and those systems had been used to hurt people who had no protection. When the preliminary report landed on his desk, he read it twice, once as a CEO, once as a man who could no longer pretend neutrality was innocence. "This confirms intent," Tunda said quietly, tapping the document. "Not negligence, not miscommunication." Sebastian nodded, his jaw tight. "And the foundation," Tunde replied. "Charity funds diverted to cover internal shortfalls and personal expenses. It's sophisticated and traceable." Sebastian closed his eyes briefly. Lorraine's voice echoed in his mind. "Do you doubt me?" Yes, he realized. He did. Lorraine felt the shift before the words reached her. She noticed the way assistants avoided eye contact, the way approvals stalled, the way Sebastian no longer shared his evenings with her documents spread across the dining table. She confronted him in their living room, her tone light but sharp. "You're letting that lawyer poison you," she said. "This investigation is unnecessary." Sebastian looked up from his phone. "It's necessary." "For whom?" Lorraine asked. "Disgruntled staff, a maid with a grievance." Sebastian stood slowly. "For the truth." Lorraine laughed, but it sounded brittle. "Truth is whatever survives power." "Then we'll see what survives," Sebastian replied. That night Lorraine made calls. Old favors, quiet alliances, a board member here, a donor there. She framed the investigation as a threat to stability, to the Foundation's image, to Sebastian's legacy. Some listened, some hesitated, but something had changed. The next day, a former facilities supervisor named Mandla Kumalo came forward. He had left years earlier after refusing to falsify maintenance reports that masked unsafe staff housing conditions. "I was told to sign or leave," he said. "I left." Then another voice joined Lindaway. She appeared on a video call arranged by Tunda, her face thin but resolute. She spoke of humiliation, unpaid wages, the night she was escorted out without her belongings. "I thought it was my fault," she said. "For years." Nokuthula listened, her hands clenched, recognizing the same wounds. As testimonies accumulated, patterns hardened into facts. Investigators flagged the security footage from the gala. Metadata showed edits. Timestamps didn't align. The corridor footage Lorraine relied on had been spliced. When the bracelet was examined, prints did not match Nokuthula's. By midweek, the report was no longer preliminary. Tunda requested an emergency board session. Lorraine arrived composed, dressed in pale silk, her expression serene. She greeted members warmly, confident in her long-standing influence. Sebastian sat opposite her, the weight of decision heavy in his posture. Tunde spoke first. He presented evidence, methodically, financial trails, witness accounts, digital forensics. Lorraine listened without interruption. When he finished, she smiled. "This is an impressive narrative," she said. "But narratives aren't convictions. Evidence is," Tunda replied. She turned to Sebastian. "You're letting this happen." Sebastian met her gaze. "I'm not stopping it." For the first time, Lorraine's composure fractured. "This will destroy us," she hissed. "It will correct us," Sebastian said quietly. The board voted to expand the investigation and suspend Lorraine's authority over internal welfare and foundation operations, pending outcome. Lorraine stood abruptly. "You're choosing them over me." Sebastian didn't raise his voice. "I'm choosing accountability." She left the room without another word. That evening, news reached Nokuthula at the hospital. Mama Eunice sat beside her, eyes shining. They suspended her authority. Nokuthula exhaled a breath she felt she'd been holding for months. "What does that mean?" "It means she can't hurt people quietly anymore," Mama Eunice said, but the relief was fragile. Saifo's condition remained unstable. The doctor was careful with hope. "We need continuity," he said. "Stability." Nokuthula nodded, understanding the cruel irony. Stability was the very thing power had denied them. Lorraine, now cornered, grew reckless. She leaked a statement to a friendly outlet, framing the investigation as a witch hunt. She named Nokuthula, without details, just implication. The comments were swift and brutal. Sebastian intervened immediately, issuing a cease and desist and initiating legal action for intimidation of witnesses. It was the first time he had used the company's power not to protect an image, but to protect people. Late that night, Sebastian visited the hospital unannounced. He stood awkwardly by Saifo's bed, hands folded. "I should have acted sooner," he said quietly to Nokuthula. She looked at him, tired but steady. "You're acting now." He nodded. "I won't stop." She believed him. Outside, the city buzzed with rumors. The foundation's donors asked questions. The board prepared for fallout. Investigators finalized findings. Lorraine watched from the edge of her shrinking circle, her certainty unraveling. She had ruled by fear for so long that she had forgotten fear could change sides. And Nokuthula, once a silent figure in service corridors, now stood at the center of a truth, too solid to erase. The reckoning was no longer approaching. It had begun. Lorraine Kingsley had lost control of the room, but she had not lost her instinct. When power slips, it does not always retreat. Sometimes it lashes out. The suspension of her authority over the foundation and internal welfare did not come with handcuffs or headlines. It came quietly, signed into minutes, buried under formal language. To the public, Lorraine remained the elegant benefactor, the poised wife of a billionaire, CEO. To those who knew her well, the change was unmistakable. She was no longer patient. The first call she made after the board session was not to a lawyer. It was to a fixer, a man who understood how to create pressure without leaving fingerprints. "I need time," Lorraine said calmly. "Buy it for me." Time she knew was dangerous for Nokuthula Mbatha and those standing with her. Investigations gathered strength as days passed. Witnesses found courage, documents aligned. If she could fracture that momentum, delay testimony, scare people back into silence, she could still survive this. The pressure began that same night. Kwame Boateng was followed. He noticed it first outside his apartment, an unfamiliar car, idling too long, a shadow, lingering near the entrance. The next morning, a notice appeared under his door. Eviction for breach of lease. No explanation, no appeal. When Kwame called the property manager, the answer was clipped. Ownership changed. Kwame understood immediately. He called Mama Eunice, his voice tight. "They're closing in!" Mama Eunice did not hesitate. "Come to my place." By morning, Mama Eunice Okafor faced her own threat. A letter arrived citing unauthorized occupancy of the small house she had rented for nearly a decade. She read it twice, then folded it carefully. "So this is how it ends," she murmured. But when Nokuthula heard, her reaction surprised them all. "No," she said quietly. "This is how it shows." They gathered that afternoon in a borrowed room near the hospital. Kwame, Mama Eunice Nokuthula, and Barrister Tunde Akinwale. The air felt heavier than before. but clearer. "She's retaliating," Tunde said. "This is intimidation. Can we prove it?" Kwame asked. "Not yet," Tunde replied, "but we can anticipate it." Nokuthula listened, her gaze fixed on the table. Her hands were steady now. Fear had already taken its toll. What remained was resolve. "She'll try to force a choice," Nokuthula said, "between the truth and Sifo." As if summoned by the words, Nokuthula's phone buzzed. An unknown number. She stepped outside to answer. "Ms. Mbatha," a man's voice said smoothly. "This situation has become unfortunate." Nokuthula closed her eyes. "Who is this concerned party?" the man replied. "Your brother's care is expensive. Disruptions happen. Files get misplaced." Nokuthula's heart pounded. "What do you want?" "Cooperation," he said. "Withdraw your statement. Publicly. Say you misunderstood, that emotions ran high, and if I don't—" A pause, then softly, "Hospitals are complicated places." The line went dead. When Nokuthula returned to the room, her face was pale, but her voice was firm. "She's forcing it." Tunde nodded. "Then we move faster." Across the city, Sebastian Adewale Kingsley was facing a different kind of storm. Donors called, partners asked for reassurances. A board member suggested a controlled public statement to manage optics. Sebastian listened and refused. "No statements," he said. "Not until the findings are complete." "But the market," someone began. "I will not trade truth for calm," Sebastian replied. That night, Sebastian requested security logs, phone records, and access trails unfiltered, unaltered. He bypassed internal channels entirely, authorizing an external digital forensics firm. Lorraine noticed immediately. "You're undermining me," she accused when they confronted each other in the living room. "I'm uncovering facts," Sebastian said. She laughed sharply. "You think facts will save you. This will ruin everything we built." Sebastian's voice was quiet. "It will reveal what we built on." The next morning, Sifo's condition deteriorated sharply. Nokuthula was called from the corridor into a small consultation room. The doctor spoke carefully, choosing words that carried both urgency and restraint. "He needs immediate, uninterrupted care," the doctor said. "Any further delays put him at serious risk." Nokuthula nodded numb. "What do you need from me?" "Authorization," the doctor said, "and assurance that coverage will hold." "Coverage," the word echoed. Lorraine's choice was clear. Now the truth, or Sifo's life. Nokuthula returned to Sifo's bedside and held his hand, feeling the warmth of the fragility. He stirred, opening his eyes. "You look like you're fighting something," Sifo whispered. Nokuthula smiled weakly. "I am." "Don't stop," he said, "even if I get scared." Tears blurred her vision. "I won't." That afternoon, Barrister Tunde filed for immediate witness protection measures, limited temporary, but enough to put eyes on Nokuthula Mama Yunus and Kwame. It was a risk. It also sent a signal. Lorraine responded with fury. She convened a private meeting with a sympathetic board member and 2 donors, pressing the narrative of betrayal and instability. She suggested Sebastian was compromised, emotionally entangled, manipulated by staff. The donors listened politely. One declined to intervene. The other asked for time. Lorraine left the meeting, knowing her circle was shrinking. That evening, the external forensics report landed on Sebastian's desk. Edited footage, altered access logs, communications linking intimidation attempts to accounts Lorraine controlled through intermediaries. It was enough. Sebastian forwarded the findings to Tunde with a single message: proceed. The next day, the board was called into emergency session. Before it began, Lorraine confronted Sebastian in the hallway, her composure finally cracking. "You're choosing a maid over your wife," she said, her voice low and shaking. Sebastian met her eyes. "I'm choosing the truth over fear." Inside the room, Tunde laid out the retaliation eviction notices, Time to testimony calls to the hospital intermediaries making threats. The evidence was circumstantial, but cohesive, forming a pattern too clear to ignore. The board voted narrowly, but decisively, to expand protective measures for witnesses and to refer the matter to external authorities. Lorraine stood as the vote concluded. "This is a mistake," she said. "You will regret it." "No," Sebastian replied. "We already regret waiting." Outside the hospital, Nokuthula received the call she had been bracing for. "They're moving it forward," Tunda said. "Authorities will be involved. Your protection begins tonight." Nokuthula closed her eyes and exhaled. "And Sifo?" "I've arranged coverage," Tunda replied. "Independent. It can't be touched." For the first time in weeks, Nokuthula allowed herself to breathe. Lorraine Kingsley returned home alone that night, the house echoing with a silence that felt unfamiliar. She had ruled by fear for so long that she had mistaken it for loyalty. Now the fear had shifted, and Nokuthula Mbatha, cornered, threatened, nearly broken, had refused to choose silence. The next move would decide everything. The morning of the emergency board hearing broke with a brittle stillness, as if the city itself were holding its breath. Nokuthula Mbatha woke before dawn in the small protected apartment arranged overnight. For the first time in weeks, she had slept without jumping at every sound. Still, the quiet felt unreal, temporary. She sat on the edge of the bed and pressed her palms together, grounding herself in the weight of the moment. Today, everything would be tested. At the hospital, Sifo slept under steady monitoring. His color improved just enough to ease Nokuthula's chest. The doctor had been careful not to promise miracles, but continuity of care had returned. That alone felt like mercy. "Go," Mama Eunice urged gently when Nokuthula hesitated at the doorway. "We'll stay with him." Nokuthula nodded, kissed Sifo's forehead, and left with a resolve that surprised her. Fear still lived in her, but it no longer led. Across town, Kingsley Holdings buzzed with restrained urgency. Assistants whispered. Phones vibrated endlessly. Security protocols doubled. The emergency session was closed to the public, but the building felt watched, as though walls themselves expected confession. Sebastian Adewale Kingsley arrived early. He stood alone in the boardroom for a moment before anyone else entered, gazing at the long table where decisions had always felt abstract. Today, the consequences were human. He thought of Nokuthula's voice in the lobby, of the gala, of the hospital corridor where silence had almost cost a life. Lorraine Kingsley entered last. She wore black, sharp, elegant, deliberate. Her posture was perfect, her expression unreadable. Only the tightness around her eyes betrayed the pressure beneath. They did not greet each other. Barrister Tunda Akinwele called the session to order. His voice was calm, measured, designed to withstand interruption. "We are here," he said, "to review findings that indicate systemic abuse of authority, financial misconduct, witness intimidation, and obstruction." Lorraine's lips curved faintly. Allegations, she corrected. Tunde nodded. Findings. He began with the timeline. Payroll discrepancies mapped across years. Charity accounts routed through intermediaries. Internal approvals concentrated in Lorraine's office. Testimonies corroborated by logs and metadata. Security footage edits placed alongside original file signatures. As the presentation progressed, the room grew heavier. Board members exchanged glances. Some shifted in their seats. Others stared straight ahead, confronted with evidence that no longer allowed polite distance. Lorraine spoke once early, to dismiss the first set of documents as administrative overlap. She spoke again, to question witness credibility. By the third interruption, Tunda raised a hand. "Madam Kingsley," he said evenly, "you will have the opportunity to respond in full." She leaned back, eyes narrowing. "I intend to." When Nokuthula entered the room escorted by counsel, the air changed. She did not look at Lorraine. She did not look at Sebastian. She looked at the table, then lifted her chin. Tunde invited her to speak. Nokuthula told her story without embellishment. The lobby, the rules of silence, the unpaid wages, the gala, the bracelet, the threats, the hospital. She spoke as someone who had already lost the luxury of fear. When she finished, a board member cleared his throat. "Why continue?" he asked quietly, when the cost was so high. Nokuthula met his eyes. "Because the cost of silence was higher." Lorraine laughed a single sharp sound. "You expect us to believe this is altruism. You were angry. You wanted revenge." Nokuthula turned to her at last. "I wanted my brother to live. I wanted people to be paid. I wanted to work without kneeling." The room fell silent. Sebastian stood then. He had not planned to speak yet, but something in the exchange demanded it. "I failed," he said quietly. "I failed by not asking questions sooner, by treating silence as stability." Lorraine stared at him. "You're condemning me?" Sebastian shook his head. "I'm condemning what I allowed." He turned to the board. "Whatever decision you make today, I will abide by it, including consequences for me." The admission rippled through the room. Tunde proceeded to the final portion: retaliation. Eviction notices timed to testimony, hospital interference via intermediaries, calls traced to shell accounts linked to Lorraine's network. Lorraine rose abruptly. "This is a farce," she said, voice tight. "You're constructing a narrative to protect him." "No," Tunde replied. "We're establishing pattern." Security shifted subtly as the tension spiked. The vote came sooner than expected. The board moved to refer findings to external authorities, freeze relevant accounts, and suspend Lorraine Kingsley from all corporate and foundation roles, pending prosecution. The vote passed by a single margin. Lorraine stood very still. "You think this ends here?" she said softly. "It doesn't." Sebastian met her gaze. "It ends the way it should have begun." Lorraine left without another word, her heels echoing down the corridor like a countdown. Outside the building, word spread faster than anyone anticipated. Not details yet, but direction. A reckoning was underway. At the hospital, Nokuthula received the call as she sat beside Sifo again. "They voted," Tunde said. "Authorities are taking over." Nokuthula closed her eyes a breath, leaving her that felt like release and grief intertwined. "Thank you." "This isn't finished," Tunde cautioned. "The next phase will be public." "I know," she said. "I'm ready." Lorraine was not finished either. That evening, a statement appeared online, carefully worded, dripping with denial. She framed herself as a victim of betrayal, of manipulation of a husband who had chosen scandal over loyalty. The response was swift. Partners paused. Donors withheld funds. Media inquiries multiplied. Former staff came forward with names and dates. What had been contained could no longer be. Sebastian issued a brief statement of his own, plain unadorned. "We will cooperate fully. Accountability matters." For the first time, the words felt true. Night fell heavy over the city. Nokuthula sat in the hospital chapel once more, not to beg for strength, but to give thanks for it. She did not know what tomorrow would bring: headlines, hearings, retaliation of another kind. But she knew this: she had not knelt, she had not lied, and the silence that once protected power had finally broken. The final reckoning waited just beyond the door. The reckoning did not arrive with sirens or spectacle. It arrived in paperwork, court filings, press briefings, and quiet confirmations that power once exposed could no longer hide behind elegance. Within 48 hours of the board's decision, external authorities formally opened an investigation into Lorraine Kingsley's financial activities. Bank accounts tied to the Kingsley Foundation were frozen pending audit. Subpoenas followed. Former staff were contacted, protected, and finally heard. The story broke slowly at first. A senior executive's spouse under investigation. Allegations of wage theft and intimidation. A charity empire facing scrutiny. Then it accelerated. By the end of the week, Lorraine Kingsley's name was no longer wrapped in admiration, but in questions. Interviews she once controlled were replaced by legal statements. Allies who had once answered her calls let them go unanswered. Lorraine retreated into silence, but this time it was not her weapon. Sebastian Adewale Kingsley watched the fallout. With a heaviness, he did not try to escape. He met with regulators, he spoke to the board, he authorized restitution funds for affected staff before any court ordered it. When a journalist asked him why, he answered simply, because waiting longer would be another form of harm. At the hospital, Nokuthula Mbatha lived in a different kind of waiting. Sifo's condition stabilized slowly, carefully. The doctor spoke in measured optimism. "He's responding," he said. "It will take time." But the danger has passed. Nokuthula held Sifo's hand and felt the truth of those words settle into her bones. For the first time in months, she allowed herself to imagine tomorrow without dread. Mama Eunice cried openly when she heard the news. "You see," she said, gripping Nokuthula's hands, "life did not leave you." Kwame Boateng, reinstated with full pay pending the investigation's outcome, visited that afternoon. He looked lighter than Nokuthula had ever seen him. "They're correcting the payroll records," he said. "People are being paid retroactively." Nokuthula nodded, absorbing it slowly. Justice, she was learning, did not feel dramatic when it arrived. It felt quiet, heavy, real. Lorraine Kingsley was arrested 2 weeks later. No cameras followed her into the courthouse, just documents, charges, and the absence of the power she had once commanded effortlessly. Her legal team moved quickly, arguing influence, misunderstanding, targeting. But evidence had its own voice. Edited footage, financial trails, witness testimony, patterns too consistent to dismiss. When Lorraine pleaded not guilty, no one was surprised. What surprised many was Nokuthula's response. She did not attend the arraignment. She did not speak to the press. She did not celebrate. Instead, she sat beside Sifo, reading softly from an old book they had shared as children. "What happens now?" Sifo asked. Nokuthula smiled faintly. "Now we heal." Sebastian requested a meeting with Nokuthula, a month later, off the record, without lawyers, without ceremony. They met in a modest conference room at the hospital. Not the tower that once defined power for both of them. "I owe you an apology," Sebastian said, standing when she entered. Nokuthula gestured for him to sit. "You don't owe me words," she said. "You owed action. You gave it." He nodded. "I want to do more." She met his gaze steadily. "Then listen to people like me before things break." Sebastian exhaled. "I will." He offered her a position, one that came with salary security and influence. Not as a symbol, as a role with authority. Nokuthula considered it carefully. "I'll accept," she said, "if it's about systems, not saviors." Sebastian smiled, humbled. That's exactly what it should be. The first restitution payments reached former staff within weeks. Some cried, some remained wary. Trust, Nokuthula knew, took longer than justice. Mama Eunice chose to retire. Her back finally allowed rest. She moved into a small home paid for through the restitution fund. "I've cleaned enough floors," she said with a laugh. "Now I'll tend a garden." Kwame joined an external oversight committee, his fear replaced by cautious pride. And Nokuthula. She walked through the hospital corridors no longer as a woman bracing for loss, but as someone learning how to live beyond survival. One afternoon, she stood by the window as Sifo slept peacefully, sunlight warming the room. "You didn't kneel," Sifo murmured without opening his eyes. Nokuthula smiled. "Neither did you. The trial would take time. Consequences would unfold slowly. Lorraine Kingsley's fall would not erase the harm she had caused, but it had stopped its continuation. And that mattered. Months later, as the city moved on and headlines faded, Nokuthula returned once more to the hospital chapel. She sat, quietly, hands resting in her lap, not asking for strength this time. She already had it. She thought of all the people who never get to speak, all the moments. Silence feels safer than truth. And she understood now what courage truly was. Not shouting, not winning, but refusing to disappear. When she left the chapel, the city greeted her with its noise and movement, unchanged yet different. Because somewhere within it, power had learned that even the poorest voice, when grounded in truth, could shake walls built on fear. Sometimes the world teaches us a painful lesson. Silence can feel safer than truth, especially when power stands in front of us and fear whispers that resistance will cost everything. Nokuthula Mbatha's story reminds us that this belief, though common, is the quiet foundation on which injustice survives. Nokuthula did not begin as a hero. She was a young woman trying to keep her brother alive, trying to survive in a system designed to erase people like her. She had no influence, no protection, and no guarantee that speaking up would change anything. What she had was dignity, the kind that does not shout, does not threaten, and does not disappear when pressured. Her courage was not loud. It was steady, and that made it dangerous to those who relied on silence. This story shows us that real power is not always found in wealth, titles, or control. Sometimes it lives in the decision to remain human when the world pushes you to kneel. Justice, as we see here, is rarely instant. It comes slowly, often after loss, fear, and deep exhaustion. But when truth is carried with persistence, it gathers allies. It exposes systems. It shifts what once felt unmovable. There is also an important reminder for those who stand nearby. Doing nothing is still a choice. Looking away still shapes outcomes.
Change did not come until people stopped treating silence as neutrality and began treating it as responsibility. Healing followed accountability. Not revenge, and dignity was restored, not by humiliation, but by recognition. If this story moved, you take a moment to reflect. Have you ever stayed silent when something felt wrong, or stood alone when speaking up seemed impossible? Share your thoughts and feelings in the comments. Your voice matters more than you may realize. And if you value stories that explore courage, justice, healing, and hope in real human lives, subscribe to the channel. Your support helps these stories continue to be told and reminds others that even the quietest voice can still change everything.